I just wanted to do a quick overview on block patterns, blocks, and overlays, and how we can kind of utilize this tool and functionality in the creation kit to uh, combine and create multiple world spaces that are all in one instance in game. So, a good example of this would be in the DLC Shattered Space. You have the city Dazra, and then you have a bunch of locations around it. Those are hand placed in there. Um, Another good example would be on Mars. There are these locations around the what is it, Cydonia. Cydonia has like a little spaceport, and then there's a Mars landing pad nearby. There's some old mining facilities for one of the main quests, the faction quests. So you can kind of take these multiple little world spaces and stitch them together using block patterns. And I'm going to do a quick overview on what blocks are, what overlays are, and how they make up block patterns. But we're not going to dive too deep. And then after I kind of give the lecture portion, the overview, we're going to go into the creation kit. We're going to make two little world spaces, and then we're going to make a block pattern that combines them. And so that way, when we load it up into Starfield, we can see on our map, hey, this is, location one and location two. They're side by side next to each other, even though in the editor they're completely separate. Quick disclaimer, this guide is more of an advanced look at some of the tools the Creation Kit has. We won't be going over things such as what locations are, how to navigate the editor, and so on. Really, the main idea is to showcase a cool technique for you to use when designing content. So, just to kind of explain what blocks are, they're terrain pieces. When you land on Starfield on a planet, the game will take a collection of terrain blocks and stitch them all together. And some of those patterns are completely dependent on the planet. So if it's random, the planet will have a kind of a tree that it chooses from for these patterns. Some patterns can be customized by the user and placed down. So these would be like New Atlantis, for example, or Dazra. They both have their own block pattern customized just for that location. So, and that's what we're going to do here. But to kind of get back to the main idea here is what are blocks? They're terrain pieces. They're the main building block, quite literally, of block patterns. So an example over to the right is the Crater Sharp Sparse Large 2K09. It is a much larger block, and it's the ninth iteration of that. So whenever we place down the Crater Sharp Sparse Large, one of 10 of these is going to show up in that block. In this case, we're showing the ninth one. So blocks can also have overlays applied to them. So when the game, the planet content manager places these blocks down, if it has the ability to, it will put an overlay on them. That overlay could be something that's instance, such as a UC listening post, a cave, an abandoned mech facility, something along those lines, or it can be explicitly unique, like a city or a quest location or something that was specifically meant to be placed there. So in this example, we could put Cydonia down on one of these creator spots, right? Or we could put, if you're making a quest that you want only this location to show up once, then you check that it's unique and you place this block somewhere specific in a block pattern, wherever, right? Blocks can either be 1 kilometer or 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer. So the example here, it's 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer, and this is just a basic terrain piece. An example of a more specific terrain piece is Dazra's location. So this is the Dazra Mesas Eroded 2K01. So it's a 2 kilometer block. It's only used at Dazra, but there's nothing really stopping you from using it somewhere else. You just kind of have to cut out an overlay from this block and then define the block can be created somewhere else. So whether that be through a block pattern or messing around with that planet's tree. We're not going to go into that. I don't really have a ton of knowledge on how to do that. I prefer to do things through the block or the pattern block pattern editor. So there's multiple ways to get the same job done. But if you're wanting to do something a little bit more hand placed, have everything kind of fit together the way you describe it, then you can do this. You can take this block and put it in a block pattern and use the same exact terrain that Dazra was based off of. So, oh, before I go too far, so overlays. So overlays are placed onto blocks. If block is the main terrain, overlay is the dressing, right? So we take some world space that we've created based on a terrain from a block, and now we edit that block whenever it's in game. So when the planet content manager places a block and it says, hey, we can place this overlay on top of it, it will now exchange all of the terrain and whatever would have been put there with our overlay. So these overlays can have, a more unique terrain. Maybe we edit some of the terrain, we put some, a path here, some rocks over here, whatever, and then we actually put like real objects like a landing pad, I don't know, a little hangar, wherever, right? So that all exists in the world space as an overlay, and you know these overlays can, like we kind of mentioned before, they can be unique, like Dazra City, New Atlantis, Aquila, or they can be instance, like a UC listening outpost, a cave, etc. And so these can also be generated by the PCM, the Planet Content Manager, or applied to a block pattern directly, which is what we're going to be doing. So to kind of just highlight or give a showcase of that, here is the original block on the bottom left corner for Dazra. Not very interesting. In fact, it was procedurally generated by some terrain generator that Bethesda made, and then a designer came in and on the overlay edited it to fit their vision, right? So there's rocks everywhere. The terrain is sunken in there for the landing pads. They went in and they hand did this with a terrain editing tool and like an object palette. Excuse me. So it shows you what the power that you have. These are the exact same spots, and they're almost entirely different. So now to kind of get to the meat and potatoes, block patterns. What are they? How do they function? What do they look like? What really goes on? So when the game loads up a space for the player to land on, it'll show an 8x8 block. So there is 8 blocks by 8 blocks. And I'm saying block specifically because even though a block is a kilometer, it's not exactly 8 kilometers by 8 kilometers. There's actually a little bit of border in between each of these blocks. On the outside of every block is about 100 meters of a border. So it's about a cell wide. So each side total will give you about an extra 200 meters in length of your block. With that being said, that means you kind of this 8x8 block is actually about 9.5 by 9.5 kilometers, maybe 9.6. With a 2 kilometer block, you actually get about 2.2 kilometers in size, not including the border. So total 2.4, and then the 1 kilometer block is actually in total 1.2. So you get a little bit of excess just due to these borders. So it can be a little tricky to understand exactly how that looks. We'll when we make our 2 little locations that we pair together, we'll actually do a little test of our own using map markers to kind of showcase this and see exactly where that border is. And to kind of give a even closer look, here is the Dazra overlay. So this is the actual terrain that Dazra uses that's been edited. The objects aren't in the view just because I'm too far away in the editor to show that in this case. But this is the actual terrain. It's 2.2 kilometers plus an extra 200 meters on the outsides, the border. And in this case, the border is given. So you can see it on the bottom left here, where you have these red cells. Those red cells are the border region that isn't included in your world space. It's just there. They show it, However, it's not part of your world space. So that would be, the red included, that's 2.4 kilometers. The open space that is shown there where objects are placed in the bottom left corner there, that's part of the 2.2 kilometer length block. So it's editable, and then the border space. And essentially what that border space is it's just terrain that's going to be stitched into the next neighboring block. So they give you a little bit of leeway, so that way you have about 200 meters to adjust the terrain height. And obviously that's going to be done for you. You don't have to worry about that. But because of that, you don't want to place any objects in there. If you place any objects in there, if you could place any objects in there, it would mess with where those objects are actually shown. They might not even appear. They're probably buried under the terrain. It's best just to leave it blank and let the content manager fill those in with trees or rocks or wherever. So to kind of show what Dazra's block pattern looks like, though, we have that Dazra world that was in the last screen here. This 2x2 or 2.2 plus 0.2 block. It's sitting in the middle of this block pattern. We can now say, hey, there's this block pattern that we want. We want to put Dazra City right there in the middle, and we want to surround it with 13, or is it 13? 12? We want to surround it with 12 other little points of interest that we've also hand created. In this case, later on, we're only going to do 2, but it kind of, shows how powerful this can be. You'll notice that there's a yellow box, a red box, and then you can't see it with the background, but there's a black box at the very edge. These boxes are the spaces that are defined where the player can actually go. So the yellow space is a landable area. You're only going to be able to land at that yellow space. The red space is playable area, and then the black space is like the final world space border. And I don't remember if it's the red space where the invisible wall is or the black space is, but it does technically extend out past that with even more terrain blocks. It's just you can't really go out there. So there is still limitations to how big your overall composite world space can be, but it's still bigger than, a few hundred meters, right? So to kind of show what that looks like in the galaxy view, they've placed this block down, and by extension, the block now dictates all of these little overlays around it. So instead of placing each of these overlays like you'd see there with the little red circles and that green circle in the middle, you just place the block down that we've defined, and all of those show up automatically. And then I think, so one more thing to discuss. When we look at this, there is other things we can do with these terrain pieces. So if you look, you'll see like these little L's, the green L with like the white bar and then the black one. You can actually rotate these pieces around and use these terrain pieces to stitch together. So in the case of New Atlantis, if you look, there's these canyon pieces where one side of the terrain is high up and one side is down low, and there's like a big terrain wall, so a canyon. They've gone in and rotated these pieces around so that they're all like a big bowl in the middle of, it's either a bowl or a raised up area, I can't remember. But essentially there's a low area and a high area around the New Atlantis world space. So you can go in and use these pieces and stitch them together, like rivers or canyons. I haven't tested it personally, but I'm assuming you can just based on what's going on at New Atlantis. Only condition that I've noted so far is that you can't rotate or flip an overlay. It has to be a block that is just a blank block terrain, because then the game will go in and put all these little pieces on it, like trees and rocks and things like that, but it doesn't need to worry about flipping assets that you've placed down personally. So I don't know if it's possible to rotate or flip unique overlays, but if it is, I mean, I would like to know, so leave a comment. So now let's go into the editor and actually go in and make our little world spaces. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm just going to go in and make a few locations. Let's do this so it shields my view so we don't get overwhelmed with all this stuff. All we're going to do is make 3 locations, an umbrella location that kind of dictates the surface planet that it's on, and then 2 child locations for each of our world spaces. Each world space has to have its own unique location, so it's always good to have, a, a location made ready to go for it. And in this case, since we're stitching multiple locations together, it's nice to have just kind of a parent location for all those world spaces to exist under. So I'm gonna put a little prefix here, and I'm just gonna say parent location. This really doesn't have to be anything crazy. The naming of this location, I mean, you can get a little creative with how you do it. You can mess around with it, change stuff. It's up to you. But the one thing that we do need to set is the parent location for this location is going to be. I can't remember if Schrodinger is as a SS. Let's see here. I can't remember how to spell Schrodinger. If it's SSCH or SSH. But we need to find Schrodinger 3. So we're going to place our planets or our block pattern on Schrodinger 3, which maybe I did. Oh, there it is. Okay, so it is SC. So SSC, we want Schrodinger 3 surface. So all this is star Schrodinger, planet Schrodinger 3, and then surface. So that is the parent location for our little block pattern parent location. We're gonna press OK, and then we're gonna make 2 child locations, and we're just gonna call those location 1 and location 2. For the parent location, we're going to do our newly minted parent location, CVA01, parent location. We're good to go. Then we're going to duplicate this and name it location 2. Okay, now we have a new form. We have our 3 locations to find. Simple as that. We're not really doing anything interesting here. But now we're going to go through and make our 2 overlays. So let's pick 2 blocks out and get started. For the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to choose 2 of the same terrain blocks. So we'll just do fields, hill, small. Or we could probably do something a little more interesting. Let's maybe do 2 volcanoes. So we'll do volcanoes eroded large 1K and another one for 2K. So a 1 kilometer block and a 2 kilometer block. So that way you can kind of see where each of them spawn in next to each other. So we'll go preview block 5 and then cut it up. Let's hide our galaxy view. Okay, that looks pretty cool. Big fan of large volcanoes. So let's start cutting this. And we're going to go to the max size that we possibly can. However, one thing you'll notice, if you ever click max extent, it won't let you go past 6x6. That's fine if you want to make a block or an overlay and just place it somewhere, but if you're going larger, you do need to start looking at block patterns themselves because you're going to have some wonky issues with the blocks when you just do an overlay and place it on a planet. I noticed, one of the places I made was entirely underwater. There was another where it was just off the grid entirely. So if you go larger than 6x6, not recommended unless you're doing what we're doing here. So we actually want to we're going to do something directly in the middle. We're going to do 10 cells, which is 100 meters each. So a kilometer by a kilometer. And then with the red border there, it's going to be 1.2 kilometers total. So with that, we're going to name this, let's do our prefix and we'll just call it volcano eroded large. 05, 2K05, world space. Nothing crazy. We're not doing anything interesting here. When you start naming your stuff, I mean, you can name this as your world space for whatever you want. But for us, we are just doing something simple. So we're going to keep track of it like this. Okay. So our world space is now edited, flipped out, and this will be our overlay. So before we do anything, we're going to go in and we're going to click these buttons over here next to our world space ID there, the drop down, and we're just going to set our location. So we're going to do child location 1. For our biome, I believe the biomes that they have for Schrodinger 3, we could use Hills 04. I don't think you have to set this, but I'm just going to set it just to force it anyway, so that way we don't have any issues. Again, a lot of the stuff doesn't matter from a case-by-case standpoint. I just don't want any wonkiness when we load in. So, okay, this is our first world space. Before we move on to our next one, let's go in. We're going to add in, I'm pressing B to show our cells here. We're going to add in some map markers at each of the corners, so that way when we load it into game, we can kind of see, hey, here's the max extent of our overlay. Here's corner 1, corner 2, 3, 4, etc. We'll go in and edit it. We'll set our marker data. And here we are going to name it we're going to give it like an identification for where we are in this cell. So this cell, if you look up here, we're in -5, -5. So we're going to just say N5, N5 for -5, -5 on location 1. We're going to set visible, we're going to set discovered, and that's really all we need to do. I'm not going to worry about setting to COC. Actually, we could. Why not? I think that should be fine. Okay, whatever. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. There have been worse things that have happened, so. So now we're going to go over to this corner. We're going to paste. We're going to place this map marker in this corner. Just put it as far as we can. And then we are going to see which one we're in. We're in 4, -5, which makes sense. That's the other side. So +4, -5. And in game, we will see, hey, this is our other location. This is the grid on the map that it is. And if we jump over to the spot, it'll put us right where this marker is. So this should be +4, +4. It's going to show +5 because I'm actually outside of that cell now in this view, but it's +4, +4. We're good to go. Now we're going to go to our last cell, put our last marker. Sorry, I know this is a little boring, but it will make sense at the very end when we have all this stuff worked out. Close enough. We'll say this is -5, +4. We are going to go ahead and place a final marker here. That way we can just load into this and we will make this map marker visible from the galaxy view. So whenever you see this planet, you'll see this map marker. We'll also give it a nice little fun icon. So we'll do NASA. We'll say visible in star map and allow grab jump. So we'll place that there. And I believe all we need to do for landing just put a landing marker, but it's been a while since I've done a landing marker, so this might not be exactly what we need. Let me see if this is the one. I think this should be fine. We'll put it right about there. And then I believe if we do linked ref again, that should be fine. But again, it's been a while, so it doesn't work immediately. If it doesn't work the way we expect it to, then so be it. So don't think we need a key marker. Oh, it looks like our reference got taken. Oh well, that should be fun. Worst things have happened. What we're looking for will still work. So we want to load in here and that'll be fine. What's likely going to happen is if none of this works, when we actually press this, it's going to put our ship somewhere off in the distance, some other cell, and we're going to fall down to the ground here. So, okay, with all that being done, we're going to save, make a new little ESP, and ignore all these other ESPs I've made testing stuff out. I'm going to call this tutorial block pattern 02. And now we're going to go cut our other space. So let's go back to our block view. We'll do, I think we did volcano eroded. So we want volcano eroded large 2. Yeah, we did 1 before, and now we want 2. Okay, so let's do like 4. I don't know. Or is this mountains? Oh, I did mountains. Okay, well, we'll do this one then. Okay, so much smaller space. It's only 1 kilometer. I think it looks good. Let's go ahead and start cutting. Let's put this one, it's not size. Let's do 2 and 2 again. Or we did 1K the last time. Actually, no, let's do a 2K size. So let's go in, we're gonna preview block. If you've never done that before, all we're doing is previewing the block. We see the terrain, it shows this is like this test world space, and we're gonna go in and cut it. So that's all we've been doing. So this looks cool, I like this. Let's put this at position 2 and 2 again. But this time, instead of making it 10 cells, we're actually going to do 22. Because you have 10, you have the 2 border cells in between, and then you have another 10. So this 2 kilometer block can actually be 2.2 kilometers, like we've talked about. So let's zoom out just to see our selection and make sure it looks good. I think that's great. We're in the middle. It's best to kind of leave the borders out. I don't really like the idea of pushing it 1 over. So if we push it to 1-1, that's fine. I just don't think it's great. On the other side, sometimes it'll act a little funky. So yeah, if you push it over even 1 more, this cell edge just doesn't really want to play nicely. I don't know if that's going to mess up your world space, but I would just recommend doing the center. So keep it at 22 by 22. You'll get an extra little border row here, so it's 24 by 24 with the border, and that's more than enough space to get started with a small world space that you want to start. So we're going to do CVA01. We're going to call this volcanoes eroded large 2K06. And then we're going to create the overlay. So Oh, I misnumbered the other ones. No wonder. So okay, whatever. They don't have to be perfect, but we have our new overlay. First thing we're gonna do is open up our world space, and we are gonna set our location. So this is gonna be child location 2, and you'll notice that child location 1 doesn't show up anymore. It's just child location 2. We have parent location, which we're not gonna assign to a world space. We're just gonna leave it as a parent, and then we're gonna assign the child location, which is now gonna be specifically defined for this location. So no other world space can use this now. Don't need to worry about parent world space. That's fine. We can set our biome. I think it's going to be weird if we have Hills Life 04 with this, but whatever. We're not talking about biomes. We're talking about overlays. So all that's done. Here's our little overlay. Let's go to the corners and do the old shenanigans again. But first things first, let's maybe set up our marker here. We're going to steal the eyes icon. So it's visible, it's discovered, we can travel to it, and it's visible on the star map. So that means both of our locations are going to be visible on the star map. You might be able to see, if you want to choose one or the other to land on, that's fine. And we'll allow grab jump. So all of that looks good to me. So we'll go ahead and set that. We'll copy these two and go put our corner ones so that way we can see the max extent of our playground here. So we have everything in the way we want it. Now we're gonna go make a block pattern and set it up so that way we can edit our block pattern. What we'll do then, so we'll save again. We will go to our pattern config. So here's where things get a little annoying. So we have to make a pattern configurator, and then we're gonna make a pattern that only has these volcano tiles in it. Trying to make a pattern by itself can be a little tricky. So it's best just to use a configurator that already exists or make your own. In this case, we're going to make our own. It's not hard. We're just going to say, hey, CVA 01 volcano pattern config. Okay, save, close that, reopen it. Now we have this, pattern style, pattern selector. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say, they're all start with pattern, so that's fine. We're going to say patterns eroded. I think we chose volcanoes eroded. So we'll do a pattern style that has that in it. Pattern style I don't think matters too much, but what does matter for sure is this. We want to go in, we want to see our two large volcano blocks, so 1K and 2K. And while we could go in and add in a bunch of other little block terrains to this, we're just going to stick with these two to make it simple. So it's going to be a very, very, it's not going to be an interesting block pattern, but that's fine. We really just want to show that we can take a block pattern and force things onto it. So now we have large 2K. We're going to make that 50%, 50%, 50%, 100% total. That's good to go. We saved just before we did this. Yes, that's fine. We're going to generate a pattern. It's going to get a little slow for a second, and things are going to freeze up, and that's okay. Just let the creation kit do its thing. So let's generate a pattern. So a pattern was loaded. We can kind of see it in the background. I don't really mess with a lot of the pattern generated like previews. I think it's fine the way it is. I mean, you can go in and look. You might be able to see where the seams are. I think it does a good job in this preview to stitch everything together. But this is kind of a general idea of what your block is going to look like, which is pretty cool. I think, you can kind of get a general rough idea and move on. It's not going to show any trees or anything like that, but that's fine for what we need. So let's save our pattern. It gives us a name. I think we should get rid of the config there and actually just get rid of the pattern. Just call it pattern CVA1 volcano. We'll just call it tests just to make sure. And that's good to go. We created it. Take a second to reload everything and the tree over here. We'll press OK. The moment we get an option to save, we are going to save. And there is another step that we have to do, but I'm going to show you the block pattern editor real quick. So we're going to go in here. We're going to see our block pattern. And we are going to add our overlays. However, for some unknown reason, the overlays just will not show up until you restart the editor. So I'm pulling up the overlay, the block pattern itself. It's going to look really simple. Yeah, there's just two different versions. There's the purple and the orange blocks here. Orange for the 1K volcano eroded tiles that we made, and purple for the 2K, right? Later on, we will go in and we'll find one of these blocks, or we'll define one of these blocks. Like we can redefine these themselves and say, hey, we want this to be the exact block that we're using for our 2K world space and this one to be the 1K world space. When those are defined, then we apply our overlays. But unfortunately, our overlays just will not show up until we restart. So I'm going to go restart and then I'll meet you back here on the screen. Save one more time and close it up. Okay, we are back in the editor. Let's go ahead and open our block pattern and see what blocks we can mess with. So we'll open our volcano block pattern and add our overlays. Okay. So you can kind of see right off the bat which objects we can place it on. We have 05 and 06. We want both of these blocks right here in the center. So we're going to go back to our block view. We're going to go back and remind myself. We want small one is 05, big one 06. So that's pretty easy. So we're going to take a small one, or 1K 05. We're going to click this right here. We're going to do our block pen, fill selection, and then click our block pen again. And if it'll load, that should place the 05 right there. So just the way we want it. Another way to do it. So we're going to go in, click our 06 for our large one. Now we're going to click our block pen and just click on the object directly. So you can either fill selection, so click multiple things, or you can just do one at a time. It does take a hot second to load, so once you click that pen again, it might lag a little bit, but now 06 is in, 05 is in. If we go over to our overlays and we click on one of these, we can see, hey, we can activate our new world space overlay on this. So we'll do that. Then we will unselect if I think it is lagging on me. Okay, there we go. We'll click our 06, we'll activate on block. We will save. The moment it'll let us save. Okay, there we go. Once we try to save, it'll give us like a little warning saying, hey, there's a critical change. We want to save over our pattern that we've already made. Yes, that's fine. We do not want to create a duplicate of this. That's okay. So we're going to save over that. We're going to close this, save one more time just for posterity, and then we're going to go to our galaxy view. So let's go find Schrodinger 3, and we're going to place our block on there, and that is that. We will be done and ready to go. So let's replace our view again. Sometimes you have to reset the view to be able to see certain things, like if I click down on it. We also want to see where our biomes are. Even though we did volcanoes, we're going to place this block on hills. So we'll click over here. We see that over here that our biome is hills life 04. We're going to click a plus button on our block patterns view down here, not on our overlays. So on our block patterns, we are going to press plus there. We're going to go to our pattern, CBA 01, volcano test. It's going to take a second to load, and it's going to bring in our 2 overlays. So now if we reset our view again, let's hide that so we're not blinded. Let's zoom all the way in. We should see, just like we saw in our Dazra view, our 2 overlays are placed exactly where we want them. And in game, when we load up this block pattern, it'll load both of these overlays right next to each other. So with that being said, we'll save. We will exit, and I'll see you in game. Okay, we are in game. We are going to go ahead and do a grav jump all the way to our new system, but first things first, let's test to see if that system actually showed up. So let's go find Schrodinger. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we found Schrodinger. I have God mode on, so we can just jump right there. Let's go in, see what it looks like. Okay, got the Colander in there, because that's also part of this world space. So, over here we can see our 2 locations, one with the eye and one with our NASA logo. We're gonna land in, I believe, location 1 was the place that we put down. And if we did it right, okay, so I did somehow do that right. We have our ship here. Our volcano has the Hills Life biome loaded in. We landed in the middle of it. Now let's open up our map view for the surface, and we can see, hey, here's our space, our landing spot, our actual location, our 4 corners here, and our larger location here with our other locations. And I didn't mean to do this, but I guess whenever I had set this location to be the eye, I set them all to be the eye, so that's cool. But we can kind of see, hey, there's this location and this location right next to each other. This is that 200 meter border that we kind of discussed briefly. If we go up here, we'll see those top 2 corners there as well. But first things first, let's go here. We're gonna use our scanner to kind of view that distance and see exactly how far these 2 are apart. And if we did everything right, it should be about 200 meters, or exactly 200 meters if I got it directly in the corner. So let's not get attacked by anything. Let's pull up our scanner. So here is this one. We'll be right under it. And 200 meters away is our -11 for location 2. So there we go, -11, location 2, 200 meters away. So kind of just reinforce the idea that there is always going to be a bit of a border in between these different blocks. And if we go up to this location, we'll get like a better overview of the entire map space. So here's this. Oops. Open our surface map again. And now we can see a little bit more, although I guess we're a little north, so if you walk in the center of this second block here, this location 2, you should be able to see these bottom 2 as well. But that's that. Works really nicely. the mesh or the stitching between these blocks is done pretty well. You can always kind of see a seam, especially when you don't have any objects in here. Like if we came in and littered this full of trees, then maybe it'd look a little smoother. It's not always like an abrupt line. There's sometimes a little bit of terrain curvature there. But ultimately, you now have the power to mess with that. If this were a river and this were a subsequent river that they both pass through the same spot, theoretically, this terrain should try to match this next door terrain perfectly. So if there is a dip right here, like a tunnel, not a tunnel, let's think a trench, like a river, and there's a trench here right next to it in the exact same spot, theoretically, this stitching should follow that. So there is a way to do rivers. I saw Bethesda had kind of tested rivers before. Obviously, they'd used canyons with the Jemison location for New Atlantis. So give it a try. See what you can come up with. If you can find something cool, then make a video on it or post it in one of the modding discords for Starfield. That would be really cool to see. I'm excited to see how far people take this. I just wanted to give a quick little overview. I say quick, it was an hour long, but an hour for me. Maybe editing, I can cut it down for you, but I'm excited to see what happens. So thank you.